Every iPhone owes its life to a single phone call in 1997. If that call doesn't happen, the device in your hand never clicks on. The company that saved Apple was the one rival with every reason to watch them go bankrupt: Microsoft. We are going to look past the handshake and unpack the cold, calculated math behind Bill Gates' $150 million decision. This single transaction proves that the foundation of our modern technological landscape was built on a strategy of ruthless self-interest. By 1996, Apple was dying in slow motion. The company was a revolving door of leadership, burning through 4 CEOs in just 5 years. This diagram tracks Apple's collapsing market share. The line drops continuously until it hits a baseline of just 4%, while the company's internal accounts hemorrhaged $1 billion a year. Wall Street had already written the obituary. One magazine famously put the Apple logo on its cover next to a single word: pray. In early 1997, Wall Street analysts stopped asking if the company would fail and instead started counting the hours. Apple had exactly 90 days of cash left before ceasing to exist. Failure at this stage meant the permanent erasure of an iconic brand from the history books. In a final act of desperation, Apple's board spent $429 million to buy a struggling company called Next. They weren't buying the technology, they were buying back their founder. Steve Jobs returned first as an advisor, then as the architect of a brutal internal triage, killing off hundreds of bloated product lines in his first few months. Cutting products could stop the bleeding, but it couldn't generate the massive influx of cash required to survive that 90-day window. Jobs realized that internal cuts were insufficient. To keep the company alive, he had to swallow his pride and repair a broken relationship with his greatest enemy. The two companies were in the middle of a vicious legal war. Apple had spent years accusing Microsoft of stealing the look and feel of the Macintosh to build Windows. Then, at the August 1997 Macworld conference in Boston, Jobs walked on stage and announced a $150 million investment from Microsoft. In exchange for the cash, Apple agreed to make Internet Explorer the default Mac browser and dropped all of its pending lawsuits. When Bill Gates appeared on a massive screen towering over the stage, the audience of loyal Apple fans erupted. They were booing their hero's deal with the devil in real time. This was the public surrender of Apple's identity. For the company to survive, it had to shake hands with the enemy it had spent a decade calling a thief. Why would the world's most dominant monopoly fund its own competitor? Bill Gates was executing the smartest strategic play of his career. Microsoft faced intense U.S. monopoly scrutiny. By keeping Apple on the scale, Gates could point to a living competitor and argue the market was healthy. With lawsuits vanishing, revenue streams opened, ensuring millions of Mac users stayed locked into the Microsoft Office ecosystem. Gates had effectively purchased a $150 million insurance policy against the breakup of his own empire. Jobs used that cash to reinvent the brand. In 1998, Apple launched the colorful iMac G3, signaling that the company was no longer on life support. That momentum led to a decade of era-defining products, first the iPod, then the iPhone, and eventually the iPad. Bill Gates calculated the math perfectly for 1997, but he vastly underestimated the sleeping giant he had kept alive. That decision allowed Apple to eventually become the most valuable company on the planet. While Microsoft cashed out its stake years ago, the real return on that investment was the survival of the entire technological status quo. But there is a version of history where this deal collapses. The hostility in that Boston crowd was so intense that Jobs nearly caved to the pressure and walked away in the final hour. Our modern reality hinges on that one near-failed moment. Comment the word Boston to unlock the story of how the deal almost fell apart on stage.